Sergeant Daniel Raines lay on the cold metal floor of the destroyed space station, every breath tearing at his chest like fire. Smoke drifted through the corridor, carrying the bitter scent of burned wiring and blood. Alarms wailed faintly in the distance, but to Daniel the world had narrowed to a single struggle. Breathe, hold on, don't close your eyes. He had fought battles before. He had lost friends before. But this time was different. His squad had been scattered during the Sioux ambush, their voices fading one by one over the comms until only static remained. Now silence pressed against him, heavier than the broken armor on his body. The war against the Cathari had chewed through countless humans, but today, Daniel knew, it might finally swallow him whole. He coughed, tasting copper. His armor was scorched through at the chest, the smell of seared flesh rising up from underneath. He tried to move, but his body screamed in protest, muscles trembling with the effort. The station lights flickered above him, shadows stretching long across the corridor. For a moment he thought he saw shapes moving in the dark, enemy hunters come to finish the job. He reached weakly for his sidearm, but his fingers only scraped against the floor. Then he saw her. At first he thought the smoke was playing tricks on him. A tall figure stepped into the ruined hall, her skin a smooth silver blue that caught the dim light like polished stone. Her eyes glowed faintly, pools of liquid silver that seemed to pierce through the shadows. She wore no weapon, no armor. Instead, she bore the flowing white sigil of the Medica caste, the healers of the Galactic Accord. Daniel blinked hard, unsure if his mind was collapsing into hallucination. An enemy nurse? Here, on a battlefield soaked with human blood? His instincts screamed to distrust her, to see her presence as a trick. But the figure knelt beside him, movement slow and deliberate, as though she wanted him to see every step. Her voice came soft, in perfect English. "I will heal you." Daniel's chest tightened, not from the wound but from the words themselves. Something in her tone carried a calm certainty, like a promise he wanted to believe but dared not. She reached toward the blackened plates of his chest armor, her long fingers brushing the charred metal. He flinched, trying to bat her hand away, but the movement only tore open more pain. He groaned, his body betraying him. Her touch was steady, unshaken. With a strange, fluid strength, she worked at the clasps of his uniform. His heart hammered in panic. What are you doing?" he forced out, his voice ragged. "Your shell is poisoned," she replied softly. "Your body cannot mend with it on." His uniform, the battered plates, the fabric stained with sweat and blood, it was more than clothing. It was his shield, his oath to Earth, the last piece of his squad that still remained. The thought of her stripping it away filled him with a fear sharper than the wound itself. Still, her fingers moved, undoing the catches, sliding away the ruined armor piece by piece. Metal clattered to the ground. The cool air of the station touched his burned skin and he shivered. Daniel's mind raced. Out here, in the void, you did not trust aliens. Not even ones who came with open hands. Too many times he had seen traps, hidden behind soft words. And yet, there was no blade, no weapon, no soldier's fury in her. Only patience. Only light in her hands. The nurse's eyes met his. For a long moment, neither spoke. Her silver gaze was steady, and he felt something shift inside him. An uneasy crack in the armor he wore not just on his chest, but around his heart. He wanted to shout at her, to push her away, to cling to the last scraps of his uniform and everything it meant. But his strength was fading fast. Every second, the darkness pressed closer. Her hand rested gently over his heart, and she whispered again, softer than before. "Let me heal you." Daniel closed his eyes, torn between instinct and need. Somewhere in the distance, the battle still raged. But here, in the silence of the broken station, all that mattered was the touch of an alien nurse, and the choice between trust and death. Daniel's heart pounded as the alien nurse worked at the locks of his uniform. The burned chest plate fell, away with a dull clang, and for a moment he felt more naked than he had ever been in his life. His uniform wasn't just armor, it was a piece of his soul. Soldiers lived and died in those colors. Without it, he felt stripped of duty, of belonging, of everything he had sworn to protect. He tried to push her hands away, weak as he was. His fingers brushed against her arm, but his strength had drained with his blood. She didn't resist him, with force. Instead, she simply lowered her head slightly as though acknowledging his fear. "You must let go," she said softly. Her voice was calm, steady, like a whisper against a storm. Daniel shook his head weakly. "No, you don't understand. That uniform, it's all I've got left." She tilted her head, silver eyes unblinking. "It is cloth. It is metal. It is burning your skin. If you cling to it, it will kill you." Her words were logical, almost too logical, but to Daniel they cut deep. The uniform wasn't just cloth. It was the weight of his oath, the symbol of his brothers and sisters who had fallen beside him. Without it, he wasn't a soldier anymore. He was just a broken man lying on a ruined floor. The nurse slid the scorched fabric aside, exposing the angry wounds beneath. Daniel flinched at the cold air touching raw skin. His jaw tightened, but he couldn't stop her. He was helpless, and helplessness burned worse than any wound. "You can't just—" "Take it off," he muttered, his voice cracking. Her hand hovered over his chest, glowing faintly now with that strange alien light. "I do not take, I free. You are more than the uniform, more than the pain you wear." Daniel wanted to curse at her, to shove her away, to tell her she knew nothing of being human, nothing of what it meant to hold the line while the galaxy closed in, but the words caught in his throat. All he could do was stare at her hands, their glow spreading warmth into his broken ribs, numbing pain that had nearly crushed him moments before. For the first time since the battle began, his breath came, easier. Still, fear coiled inside him. He had heard stories of alien healers. Some said they could mend wounds. Others whispered they could twist the mind, rewriting memories, softening loyalty, stealing will. What if she wasn't saving him? What if she was remaking him? You're playing with me," he rasped. "What's the catch? Why help me?" Her gaze flickered, but her hands never stopped their slow work. "Because you bleed. Because you live. That is reason enough." He stared at her, trying to read her face, to find the hidden trap in her words. But there was no cruelty there, no mocking smile, no gleam of conquest. Only a strange, quiet sadness. Daniel's thoughts tangled. His instincts screamed to resist, but his body betrayed him with every breath of relief her touch brought. For a soldier, trust was a weapon, and right now he didn't know if he was laying down arms or simply surrendering. The corridor around them groaned, metal twisting as distant explosions echoed through the station. Time was slipping. Danger was near. Yet here he was, trapped in a war not of guns and blades, but of fear and hope. She pressed lightly against his chest wound, and warmth spread deeper. He gasped, half in pain, half in wonder. His vision cleared for a moment, and he saw her more clearly now. The faint cracks along her silver skin, the weariness in her eyes. She wasn't untouched by war. She carried scars of her own. That realization unsettled him. She wasn't some flawless, untouchable being. She was tired, like him. Daniel's breathing steadied, but his heart was still torn. He looked at his uniform, lying scorched on the floor. Without it, he felt lost, but with it, he would have died. That truth cut sharper than any blade. "You strip me of who I am," he whispered almost to himself. Her glowing hand stilled for a moment. She looked at him, and in her quiet voice she said, "No, soldier, I uncover who you are." Daniel closed his eyes, torn between the instinct to fight and the need to survive, and somewhere deep inside, a crack formed in the wall he had built around himself. The healing had only just begun. The glow from the alien nurse's hands spread slowly across Daniel's chest, seeping into broken ribs and torn muscles. Warmth replaced agony like sunlight spilling into a dark, frozen place. He had been ready to die only minutes ago, but now, against all odds, life clung stubbornly to him. Still, Daniel's mind refused to quiet. Even as his body eased under her touch, a storm of doubt roared inside him. Every soldier was trained to distrust kindness from an enemy. He remembered stories of comrades who had let their guard down, only to be betrayed when they were weakest. And yet this nurse did not carry the sharpness of deception. She worked with steady care, not rushing, not exploiting his weakness. He stared at the remains of his uniform scattered on the floor. Those pieces of cloth and metal were more than protection. They were memory. Each scar on that armor told a story. The ambush at Titan's Ridge, the defense of the Martian colonies, the long march through the dust fields of Ares' outpost. Stripped away, he felt bare, as though all those battles had been peeled from him in an instant. "You don't know what you've taken from me," Daniel muttered, her silver eyes lifted to his. "I do not take. I give." Were the calms before silence. He had carried their memory in his uniform, in every battle mark, in every scorch and dent. But maybe, just maybe, their memory did not live in the armor at all. Maybe it lived inside him, fragile but unbroken. Warmth spread through his body, knitting bone and sealing flesh. The pain dulled until it was no more than a shadow. He felt stronger, yet strangely lighter, as though a weight had lifted that he had carried for far too long. For the first time, since the war began, Daniel allowed himself to exhale fully. His chest no longer burned with fire. It burned with something else, something he had almost forgotten. Hope. He looked at the nurse again, at her glowing hands, at her tired but steady gaze. She was not just an alien. She was not just a healer. She was a mirror, showing him that beneath the armor, beneath the scars, he was still human. And in that moment, Daniel realized he was not only being healed, he was being reminded what it meant to live. The alien nurse's glow was steady, her song soft, yet Daniel's chest burned with something heavier than pain, anger. Healing had begun, but peace was not so easy. A soldier's body could be mended. A soldier's heart was harder. "You don't understand," Daniel said, his voice raw but stronger than before. He forced himself to look into her silver eyes, even as his own stung with tears he didn't want to show. "That uniform means everything. My squad, my duty, my people. It's all I have left. Without it, I'm nothing." Her hands did not leave his chest. She studied him in silence, as though measuring not just his wound but the weight of his words. Then softly, she said, "You are not nothing. You are human. That is more than uniform." The simplicity of her words infuriated him. She said it as though it was so clear, so obvious. But for Daniel, it was not simple. The uniform was not just fabric and steel. It was the bond with his fallen brothers. It was the oath he had sworn when he left Earth, the only anchor that kept him from drowning in endless war. "You think I wear death like clothing?" he spat, voice trembling with rage. "You think this is just some shell I hide in? That uniform is who I am. I've lost everything else." Her glow faltered for a second, not in strength but in rhythm, as though his fury had shaken her calm. She lowered her head slightly, her voice quieter now. "I do not mock your pain. I see it. I feel it in your pulse. But you mistake the shell for the heart inside it. The uniform is not you." Daniel tried to sit up, tried to show her he was not broken, but his body betrayed him again. Pain stabbed through his side and he collapsed back with a sharp gasp. The humiliation made his blood boil hotter. He hated this feeling, this weakness, this helplessness under her gaze. He hated that she saw him not as a soldier, but as a broken man clinging to scraps of armor. "You don't get it," he said, his voice breaking. "Without the uniform, I can't fight. Without the fight, I can't honor them, and if I can't honor them, then what am I even doing alive?" The words tore from him like a confession. His throat ached with the weight of it. He had carried his squad's memory like a burden carved into his bones, never speaking it aloud. And now, under her hands, the truth spilled out unguarded. The nurse's eyes softened, and for the first time Daniel thought he saw sorrow in them, not pity. Something deeper. A memory. A loss. "We lost many," she said, voice low, almost a whisper. "Before the accord, before peace. My people fought until the skies burned black. We buried children in ash. We sang to ghosts. We carried uniforms, too, thinking they kept the dead alive in us, but they did not." Her hand trembled faintly, though her glow did not fade. "We learned too late. Healing is not only flesh, it is spirit, and spirit cannot live inside cloth." Daniel turned his face away, his jaw tight, but her words sank deep. He wanted to deny them, wanted to shield himself with anger, but he felt the truth pressing against him, heavy and undeniable. He remembered faces, young recruits who had laughed with him, cried with him, died beside him. He remembered promising himself he would carry them forever. But maybe he had carried their memory in the wrong place. Maybe he had buried them in his armor instead of in his heart. Tears pricked his eyes again, unwanted, uninvited. He clenched his fists weakly. "If I let go of it, if I let go of the uniform, then I'm afraid I'll lose them." The nurse leaned closer, her voice like calm water over stone. "No, you will not lose them. You will carry them where they truly belong. Inside. In the breath you take. In the choices you make. They live because you live." Her words struck him with the weight of truth and the sting of loss. He wanted to argue, but the strength to fight was fading. Not because his body was weak, but because her words peeled away the armor he had built around his soul. For a long time, silence filled the corridor. Only the soft hum of her healing and the distant groan of the station remained. Daniel closed his eyes, not in surrender, but in exhaustion. He realized the battle he was fighting now was not against her, it was against himself. And maybe, just maybe, it was a battle he needed to lose. The glow from her hands never faded, but Daniel felt something shift in the air around them. It was no longer just about healing wounds. It was about truths neither of them had spoken aloud until now. He had confessed his fear of losing his squad, of losing himself without the uniform. And now the nurse, this strange alien with silver skin and calm eyes, seemed ready to confess something of her own. Her voice grew quieter, no longer steady and unshaken, but fragile, like glass holding too much weight. "You are not the first soldier I have treated," she said, "and you will not be the last. I know the way you cling to the shell of war because my people once did the same." Daniel turned his head toward her, his breathing rough but calmer now. He wanted to look away, to shield himself from her words, but curiosity held him still. He saw something in her eyes he had not noticed before. Grief. She continued, her gaze fixed on her glowing hands as they pressed gently against his ribs. "When I was young, my people fought. Not against yours, not yet. We fought each other. Clan against clan, city against city. We built monuments to the dead and thought that made us strong. But the truth?" Her voice broke slightly. "The truth is, we buried too much. We buried so many that the soil itself could not hold them all." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He had never thought of aliens as carrying grief the way humans did. To him, they were always enemies, or allies, or strangers, but not this. Not broken hearts that spoke so much like his own. The nurse took a slow breath and met his eyes again. "I lost my brother. He was young, brave, foolish. He believed our uniforms gave us honor. He wore his until it was torn from his body. When I found him, he was gone, and all I had left was his shell. I kept it. I pressed it to my chest for many cycles, believing it carried him. But the truth?" She shook her head, her expression pained. "The uniform was empty. It could not hold his laugh. It could not hold his courage. It could not hold his spirit. I carried a dead thing and called it memory." Her confession hit Daniel harder than a bullet. For a moment he forgot the pain in his body, forgot the battle outside. All he saw was her face, trembling with honesty. He realized she wasn't lecturing him, she wasn't mocking him, she was giving him a piece of herself. "I healed many after that war," she whispered, "and with each wound I touched I told myself I was healing him too. But I learned I could not bring him back, I could only carry him here." She touched her chest, right above her heart. Not in cloth, not in symbols, only here. Daniel's vision blurred as tears stung his eyes. He thought of Corporal Hayes, who had died laughing at one of Daniel's bad jokes before a plasma blast tore him apart. He thought of Rivera, steady and unbreakable, who had fallen leading them through a storm of fire. He thought of Quinn, who had sung old Earth songs over the comms to keep them calm. He had kept their memory locked inside his uniform, thinking that without it, they would vanish. But hearing the nurse's words, he realized maybe he had carried them wrong all along. He swallowed hard, his voice shaky. How do you let go of something like that? How do you live without it crushing you? The nurse's eyes softened, a faint shimmer like tears forming but never falling. You do not let go. You change how you hold it. You carry them, not as chains but as light. Their voices do not vanish, they become part of your steps, your choices, your breath. You live because they cannot, and in your living, they remain. Her words wrapped around him like warmth, like truth too heavy to deny. Daniel closed his eyes, and for the first time he let himself feel the weight of every name, every face, every laugh, and every scream. It hurt. It broke him. But inside that breaking was something new, a space where healing could begin. When he opened his eyes again, he saw her not just as an alien nurse, but as someone who understood, someone who had walked the same path of loss and chosen not to drown in it. "Why me?" he asked, voice trembling. "Why help me? You could have left me here." Her answer was simple, but it carried the weight of galaxies. "Because I see life worth saving, and because I do not want you to make the same mistake I once made." Daniel's throat tightened, his chest aching not from the wound, but from the fragile hope rising in him. For the first time, he wondered if healing wasn't just about surviving. Maybe it was about learning how to carry the dead without being buried with them. The corridor was quiet now, except for the hum of distant machinery and the low rhythm of the nurse's glowing hands. Daniel lay still, his chest rising and falling in steady breaths. The fire in his ribs had dimmed to an ember. For the first time since the battle began, he was not fighting against his own body. But peace was foreign to him. Silence felt wrong. A soldier's life was made of noise, gunfire, shouted orders, the scream of ships burning. Now, lying there with his wounds closing, he felt exposed in another way. Healing stripped him bare, and bare was something Daniel had never learned to be. He turned his eyes to the nurse, who still worked with quiet patience. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the broken light, and her face, though calm, carried exhaustion. He realized she was pouring not only energy, but also herself into him. She carried her own scars, even if they were hidden beneath grace. His voice broke the silence. "You could have let me die. It would have been easier." She looked at him, her gaze steady. "Easier is not always right. You breathe. You fight. To stay. I will not waste that." Daniel swallowed. A lump formed in his throat, heavier than pain. "But why? I've done nothing for you. I've killed your kind before. We've been enemies for years. So why me?" Her expression softened, almost like a smile, but not quite. "Because you are alive. And because if I heal one, perhaps I heal more than one. Perhaps I heal a little piece of war itself." Her words made his chest ache, not from wounds, but from something deeper. Was it possible? Could kindness like hers really push back against the endless tide of violence? Daniel had spent so long believing war was the only truth left in the galaxy. Yet here was proof that something else still lived, even in the heart of battle. He felt warmth spreading deeper into him, reaching places no medicine had ever touched. It was not just his bones and muscles. It was the fractures in his heart, the guilt, the grief, the anger he had buried under steel. Slowly, carefully, those cracks began to mend, not erased, not forgotten, but softened enough that he could breathe without breaking. Daniel turned his head slightly and studied her. You heal flesh and spirit. But who heals you? The question seemed to startle her. Her hands paused for the briefest second before resuming their glow. Her voice came low, almost hesitant. I do not ask for healing, I give, that is my place. But Daniel saw the flicker in her eyes, the tiredness, the quiet sorrow she carried. Even healers need healing, he whispered. For a moment, her gaze met his, and the silence between them spoke louder than words. Two lives from two worlds bound by wounds deeper than flesh. They were not enemies here, not soldier and alien, just two broken beings, holding each other's truths. Daniel exhaled, long and steady. His chest no longer hurt. His body felt whole, again. But the greater change was inside him. The walls he had built, walls of uniform, duty, grief, were cracked. Through those cracks, light had entered. He thought of his squad, of the faces he had tried so hard to carry in armor. He realized now they had never been in the metal or the cloth. They had always been inside him, in his choices, in his breath, in the way he kept moving forward. The uniform had been a shell. The memory lived in his heart. Tears stung his eyes, and for once he did not fight them. They slipped down his cheeks, hot against skin still cooling from the burn. He let them fall. He let himself feel. The nurse said nothing, but her hand brushed his shoulder lightly. No words, no commands, just presence. And in that silence, Daniel felt understood in a way no human had ever managed. Why does it feel like you're not just healing me? He asked, voice soft, breaking. Her answer was calm, steady, full of quiet truth. Because you are not just a wound. You are a soul. And a soul must also be mended. Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt safe enough to rest. Not as a soldier, not as a uniform, but as a man. The battle outside still raged. The galaxy was still burning, but here in this ruined corridor, Daniel Raines was whole again, and maybe, just maybe, he was ready to rise not just as a fighter, but as something more. When Daniel opened his eyes again, the corridor felt different. The pain that had once chained him to the floor was gone, replaced by strength that pulsed steady in his veins. His chest was whole. His breath no longer rattled. He was alive, and for the first time he did not feel guilty for it. The alien nurse drew her hands away. The glow faded, leaving only the faint shimmer of her skin in the flickering lights. On the ground beside him lay his scorched uniform, torn and broken, a husk of the man he thought he had to be. Daniel sat up slowly, testing his body. The ache was faint, nothing compared to what it had been. He looked at the uniform, and for a long time he felt the pull to reach for it, habit, duty, identity. But his hand did not move. For the first time, he realized he didn't need it to feel like himself. He looked at the nurse. She watched him quietly, silver eyes soft, her face unreadable yet full of something human. Patience, hope, maybe even relief. Is it done? He asked, his voice steady but gentle. It is done, she replied. Your body is whole. Your spirit, it still mends. But that is your work now. Her words sank into him like stone into deep water. Healing was not a gift handed to him. It was a path he would need to walk. But now, at least, he knew the path existed. Daniel picked up the ruined chest plate of his armor. He turned it in his hands, studying the scorch marks, the cracks, the pieces that had once protected him. Once he would have clung to it with all his strength. Now he set it gently on the floor. It doesn't feel like me anymore, he admitted. His voice shook, but not from fear, only from truth. The nurse inclined her head. Because you have seen what is beneath, and that is stronger. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Daniel spoke again, his words rough but sure. "I've carried my squad in this uniform. I thought if I let it go, I'd lose them. But now, I think I carry them in me. Every step I take, they walk with me. Every breath they breathe again. That's how I honor them." The nurse's lips curved in the faintest smile, soft as a sunrise. "Then you have learned?" Daniel drew in a long breath. The air tasted different now. Not of ash and defeat, but of possibility. The war outside still raged, humanity still bled, but he was not the same soldier who had fallen on this floor. Something in him had changed. Something in him had healed. He pushed himself to his feet, unsteady, but determined. The nurse reached out as if to steady him, but he lifted a hand and shook his head gently. "I can stand." And he did. Slowly, painfully, but on his own strength. His body was healed, but more importantly, his spirit was awake. He turned to the nurse. "You said you see life worth saving. Maybe you're right. Maybe I can be more than a weapon. Maybe I can be someone who saves too." Her eyes shimmered, and though she did not speak, Daniel felt her answer in the silence. She had given him more than healing. She had given him choice. He looked once more at his ruined uniform. Then, with steady hands, he left it where it lay. It had carried him as far as it could. From here he would walk as something new. "I made an oath once," he said softly, almost to himself. "An oath to fight for my people no matter the cost. But now I think I need a new one. Not just to fight, but to live. To remember. To carry the dead without being buried with them." The nurse stepped closer, her presence calm, her gaze steady. "That is an oath worth keeping." Daniel straightened his shoulders. He was still a soldier, yes, but no longer a prisoner of his uniform. He was more. He was human, fragile and unbroken, scarred and still standing. As the station shuddered, from distant blasts, Daniel turned toward the path ahead. The war was not over, his battles were not finished, but for the first time he felt ready. Not because of the uniform, not because of orders, but because he chose to carry hope instead of chains. He looked at the nurse, and a faint smile touched his lips. "Then let me learn from you." And with that, Sergeant Daniel Rain stepped forward, not as the soldier who had fallen, but as the man who had risen.